Welcome to the Azure in Education Governance Series. My name is Eric DeBoard, and I'm an Azure TSP focused in education. I'm joined by Amy Manley and David Uoa, who are also Azure TSPs focused in education. We hope that this series will help our customers move forward with their Azure deployments, and we hope that you're going to find a lot of very relevant content as we move along. This is the first video of many to come. Now, one thing that I wanted to point out as we get started with this series is these three links below that you see on the screen here. We have our Azure in Education blog, where we have a number of topics that we talk about. We have free Azure training that's available, so you can find a link there. And then also, Azure is changing every day, every week. There's a great link there to start getting up to date on what's happening in Azure. So what is this call series all about? We have customers that we talk to every day in education that are wanting guidance for cloud adoption. So we hear their challenges, their concerns on a regular basis. Someone calls every day where we have customers that are not sure how to get started. And so in response to that, we have decided as a team to assemble this series to sort of help get our customers over those challenges. In these calls or in these videos, you're going to get general guidance for deploying Azure and new ways to think about adoption. You're also going to need to adapt that guidance to your unique scenario. So we're going to give you some really good information to think about. We're going to help you have shortcuts, but you still are going to have unique scenarios where you're going to have to adapt what we're talking about. And something that is sort of tongue-in-cheek here, but is absolutely true, is ambivalence is the enemy when you talk about Azure. There are a million ways to do things. But you just have to put a stake in the ground and get going, and hopefully this series will help you get there. So we're hoping that with this series you're going to be able to avoid analysis paralysis and just get started on your deployment journey. Amy, can you give us an idea of what we mean when we say Azure governance?
Sure, and this is a great way to avoid that analysis paralysis is using what we call the Azure scaffold. This really encompasses the pieces you need to have in place for a fully managed environment, sort of a best practices, things like resource tags and resource groups. We'll get into that later in the series, but these are all things to have in your environment for control, for billing purposes, all sorts of ways to keep your environment in check. So we're going to go through the series and all of our recommendations.
Yeah, and so when you think about governance, everyone, we know you're thinking about how do I manage cost, how do I manage access, how do I manage this thing called Azure. And so what Amy mentions here, the scaffold, is a great place to get started. There's also a link here at the bottom of the screen that will take you to a introduction to the scaffold and all these in detail, but as Amy mentioned, we are going to cover these in our future recordings as well.
And so, like we said, what we're going to cover is the governance for using the Azure scaffold for guidance, and then review things like pricing. We offer a hybrid use benefit and other programs, ways to keep costs down, maybe some automation to shut down VMs, and then taking all these use cases and best practices and applying it with a particular organization's challenges that we have created, Contoso Education, that David's going to tell us more about.
So David, what is Contoso Education?
Right, what is Contoso Education? So in this series, we're going to talk about a fictitious university or institution called Contoso Education. Interestingly, they face a lot of the same challenges that our customers in the U.S. face, both in higher education and K through 12. They have a central IT team, but the central IT team has the same challenges that most folks have. They have to face shadow IT. They have the challenges of being agile, where they have a lot of requests and they cannot fulfill those requests in time. And this education institution has about 22,500 students who attend classes both online and in the classroom.
And so I'm just going to add a little bit to what David just said, and that is that second bullet. This is interesting because these are our customers that we're hearing from. We hear what you're saying out there, and we created a scenario that mimics a lot about those scenarios that we're hearing.
And Eric, yeah, just to add to that is again, this series is again, even though it's a fictitious company, we're going to try to incorporate all the challenges that we hear as we talk to education customers on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, great point. So what are these goals and strategies that this Contoso Education customers wants to do? And everyone on the call will probably relate to this. Everyone wants to improve student retention. They want to help graduate more students. Always reducing costs, right? It's always the top of mind with everybody. Try to do more with less. Improving service availability. Many customers just have one data center and they want to say, hey, how can we provide our services and even when we experience an outage. Security is top of mind with every single customer that we talk about. So how can they improve security through services that may be offered in the cloud, and be more agile, so be able to respond to requests, adapt to the business needs when somebody wants to deploy their new software, how can they quickly deploy that. And always using cloud first, leveraging cloud resources to be able to provide business value.
Great. And so when we think about this series overall, we're going to tell you about the governance. We're going to help you understand what each different aspect of governance does for you. We're going to apply it to a particular organization, as David just mentioned. And then we are also going to have some first deployment goals in mind, because these are a lot of the goals we hear from our customers. The very first one makes a lot of sense. Get the team prepared for Azure governance. So that is the very essence of this video series. But in addition to that, and the purpose of that is to get some deployments out into Azure. And the first one that we're going to discuss is a backup and business continuity disaster recovery solution. So as we talk through this governance, as we talk about Contoso, we are going to start with some basic projects, the first being backup, as I mentioned, and disaster recovery solutions.
And then we're also going to go into deploying those initial foundational workloads. A lot of people have questions. Okay, I have my subscription. Now what? How do I connect? How do I set up a network? So we'll go over Azure networks or VNets, and then connectivity, either using VPN or there's also ExpressRoute, and then how to set up a domain controller or authentication in the cloud.
Yeah, and after talking about these foundational workloads like connectivity, like domain controllers, basic backups, getting rid of those legacy tape libraries and leveraging the cloud, we're going to talk about a specific use case that we're starting to hear more in education, particularly around workloads that are on Windows Server and SQL Server 2008. Talk about how you can leverage the cloud and some of those new offers that are going to be available. So looking forward to starting this series, and let's continue.
Yes, so welcome everyone. We're glad you're here. We hope we get a lot of benefit out of this, and stay tuned for the next video.